You're listening to Real GM Radio. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Matt Moore is here for our monthly tiers. We're going to hit every NBA team, ask which teams are ready to call their season a success. Let's jump in. All right, Matt Moore is here. We're going to do our monthly tiers in a second. But Matt, you were in the arena for Wolves Nuggets, that double overtime classic. Those are the kind of games like when you're covering it. I don't know about you, but it can be really stressful in the moment because you're juggling all these things. You have to pay attention to a bunch of stuff. Obviously, you know that your night is going to be a lot longer than maybe you expected because there was two overtimes on top of it. I didn't go to bed until after 2 a.m. on Tuesday night because I had the Locked On NBA Game Night show. I know that you were very busy late at night working that game, but it is also at the same time, I think, one of those games that after the dust settles, you're really happy that you got to experience it in person. So take me into the arena now that we're a little bit removed, specifically to the end when Russell Westbrook gets the steal on the inbound and then just sort of that roller coaster of emotions after that.
Yeah, so it's one of those games where you're looking around at your colleagues on Media Row and you're just like, this game is unbelievable. This game is amazing. And everyone's just like, can you believe this game? Like, what is happening? Like, this is incredible. And I was glad because, I wasn't writing off the game, so I got to kind of be in that moment. I got to really kind of be there, and which was cool. I will say he got the steal, crowd erupts. And immediately I was like, deep in the pits of my being, a voice rose up that said, this is gonna go badly. Because I just know, and I said this on Locked On Nuggets, there's certain things that I've just come to understand as the way that the basketball universe works is willed by the gods. And one of those things is that Steph Curry can launch up whatever shot he wants from 50 feet and it'll go in, and Russell Westbrook blows the game-winning layup. That is just what the basketball gods have decided is this is how this works out. So I knew that he was going to take the layup, and the Nuggets, to a man, off record, on record, defended that decision. They were openly talking, no question. You got to take that layup. There's no question. You got to make it. And so, he misses it, and the crowd just oh my God, because last night was the first time that there was the audible murmuring about Russ. Even when he's had bad games and bad misses, the crowd is stuck behind him the entire year. That was the first game where people were starting to be like, come on. And then he does that, and it's absolutely atrocious. And then, obviously, NAW misses at the buzzer, and everyone thinks it's over. And my colleagues on Media Row are, writing their game recaps or doing rotation charts. And I'm like, why is no one walking off? And then I was like, what? Why does Aaron look so sad? Aaron Gordon. And I was like, oh God, they called a foul.
Oh, so you couldn't even hear, it was so loud that you couldn't even hear the foul call because it was evident right away on TV. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, no, it was so loud. We all thought that they won.
Wow.
So we were packing up and getting ready to go. And it's they called a foul.
Oh, wow.
Somebody else on Media Row was like, what are they reviewing for, to see whether he was out of bounds? And I was like, no, they're calling a foul on Russ. I said this last night and I will maintain it. That foul call is an atrocity. There will be people that will be like, foul's a foul's a foul. Those are the people that if a person says that and you go to a party with them, let them hang out on their own. Do not hang out with those people at parties. That is absolutely atrocious. That was a gem of a game. In a season where there's been so many questions about the product that the NBA presents, you had this game that everybody was buzzing and talking about, 60, 10, and 10. Anthony Edwards, what an incredible game. What an incredible battle. Look at this. This is what's great about April basketball in the NBA. And the officials decided the outcome. And it was just a bummer of a way for that game to end. But overall, a really special experience being in the arena last night.
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised. I don't know, maybe I'm just on the good parts of NBA Twitter, but I'm pleasantly surprised that more of the conversation isn't about Russell Westbrook. And most people are sort of like, that game was awesome. There's obviously the Westbrook conversation happening. I thought that was going to be the entirety of all of it this morning, and it just hasn't been, which is a good thing because you're right, the game ripped and it was a really fun watch, and it was one of those instant classics. In the moment, I thought it was a foul. I was the guy at the party that you don't hang out with in that moment. And then I watched it on replay a couple times, and I'm like, no, that was a bad call. The shot was off. He ran into him. I guess you have to call it just because it looked so bad if you're the ref. Like, I don't know if I could blame the ref for calling it in that moment.
I
But at the
can.
same time,
It's total chaos. The contact was after the shot was
it was
clear.
way after the shot.
With 0.1 second. I don't care if Russ speared him into the third row.
When Nikola Alexander Walker looks a little surprised that he got the call.
Yeah.
And Westbrook, I'm just trying to read his lips when he was talking to the ref during the free throws. He was saying something to the effect of, "Way to decide the game. I'm glad you decided the game tonight," or something like that. And so it was a little bit of a bummer of a way for that thing to end, but it was just an awesome game. There's a ton of stuff to take away from it. And beyond just the emotions and being in that arena, watching that game, I think that's the sort of game, despite it coming in a loss, no Michael Porter Jr., no Jamal Murray, late scratches before that one. It's the kind of game that could really help Nikola Jokic's MVP case. And I had to submit my straw poll to ESPN on Tuesday morning, and I had SGA number 1, and I had Jokic number 2. And as always, I debated it. I really thought about it, but I try really hard not to change my opinion and that's sort of my way to subvert recency bias, right? I'm like, okay, if I had SGA this whole time, do I really feel compelled to move Jokic into that number 1 spot based on the last couple of months? Not really. They're both deserving, but I had SGA. I'm going to keep SGA. That said, I'm watching that game and I'm like, oh my God, did I screw up? Has it been Jokic all along? Because he was unreal in that game.
I have such a hard time with this one because I value winning more than most voters. Like, I work really hard on the rubric and paradigm of how you should decide the MVP. It's just something I've decided to care about. And I'm writing the definitive case for Shai right now. I'm going to write Jokic's after that. And Shai really is incredible. And like, when I do this, it's not just like, oh, here's some numbers about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like, I go through and I watch every possession. I've watched every offensive possession from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander this season. I've seen a lot of fouls. I've also seen a lot of layups and a lot of jump shots. I have a hard time because in a normal year, this is not a conversation. It's Shai. And we're just like, yeah, it's Shai. It's been Shai. It's going to be Shai. It's been Shai since January. It's done. This is not even a question. It takes what Jokic is doing for it to be a question. But I do keep coming around on who contributes more to how they contribute to winning, which they're both offensive players. Mm-hmm. And Jokic is maybe having the best offensive season in NBA history. When you factor production times impact times efficiency, it's hard to argue that he's not having, it's either like him or Curry 16 for the best offensive season in NBA history. That doesn't mean scoring. It means how do you contribute to a team's offense? And that's proven out by the fact that when he's on the court, the Nuggets have the best offensive rating in the league among any player with a 25% usage rate. Like, that bears out. The other thing is I don't want to look at multi-year views for MVP. I'm like, it's a resume award based on this season and this season only. Mm-hmm. That to me is how I've chosen to look at it. But a lot of people do look at it as, well, you got to consider this and like the history and like, do we want to give this guy 3, blah, 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 blah. And if you do that, I do wind up with this very big conundrum, which is this is unquestionably the greatest season of Nikola Jokic's career. Unquestionably. 30-point triple-double, second in steals. He's 45. He was like 45% from threes, like 43% from 3-point range. Mm-hmm. It's absurd. Like, it's unfathomable what he's doing. He's got a 30-20-20 game and a 60-10-10 game in the same season. How is it that this can be the best season of a 3-time winner's career and he not win that year?
Right.
And that question has stuck with me, even as somebody that doesn't want to consider a multi-year paradigm. I've really been stuck on that kind of idea. I think it's a brutal decision. I think Shai wins. I think it's just too hard to deny 67 wins is what they're going to get to.
Yep.
But man, it's going to be, there is no question that Jokic is going to have the greatest season of any MVP second place finish in history.
Yeah. That's a really great way to put it. I agree with you. I think Shai's going to win it. I just think you look at voter behavior. They're going to give Shai the award, right? There's a history of it. Best player on the best team and just like a regular season juggernaut. And Shai is more than deserving of the award. It's not anything to take away from him, but it almost feels like, is there another MVP that we didn't feel like so totally psyched about in the past that we could just grab from that player and give to Jokic? Because it feels like they're both so deserving of it. I want to go to the other side, though, Minnesota. Anthony Edwards. I have such a hard time with him sometimes before I get into any more of it, I love Ant. I love him. I love his competitiveness. I liked it since Georgia. Like, just I'm one of many who love watching this guy and think the world of him. And he's obviously awesome. He's going to be an All NBA guy, no question about it. He's going to be on some people's MVP ballots. He wasn't in my top 5 in my fake one, but he's going to be on some. But I have a hard time figuring him out sometimes because he had 10 points going into the fourth quarter of that game. And on my notes, I have Ant ? Written down. And then by the end of the game, I have Ant ! Written down with Ant ? Crossed out. He goes into the fourth quarter with just 10 points, finishes the game with 34 points. So you're like, okay, obviously this guy's awesome. But he also had only 10 points going into the fourth quarter in a game that felt like a playoff game pretty much the entire time. I don't really know what I'm asking here, Matt, but I don't know that there's another star in the league with that same sort of dramatic on-off switch, because when it's off, sometimes you're like, what's so special about this guy? And then when it's on, you're like, he's the best player I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think he's still learning what a lot of players in his position are and their superstar arc are, which is like they're learning how do you navigate consistency with letting the game come to you. Paul George in his prime did this a lot, where PG would come out and score 14 points in the first quarter and then vanish, and everybody like, where did PG go? And the answer is like the teams would guard him differently, so PG would take a step back because that's what his team needed, and this team would win the quarter because of all the attention that he had drawn and allowing the other guys to work their matchups. That to me was a lot of what Ant did last night. Ant wasn't forcing the issue to get his because the Wolves were winning. The Wolves were winning despite the Nuggets shooting 56% from the field, because they were still generating threes and dunks. Like they were getting great slips. He had some great passes to Rudy Gobert last night. He was absolutely phenomenal. And then in the fourth quarter, when the Nuggets come out and they hit them with a 16-2 run, now Ant says, all right, it's time. And he kicks back into gear, and he forces them by the end of the game to be sending, blatant double teams at him, not even pick and roll, just like doubling him. And he's making the right passes out of that. He's still learning about Jokic's best gift. I've said this for years, is no one in the league, and I've honestly ever seen, controls the game like Nikola Jokic does. But that's what the great players do, is they don't just score and they don't just get what they want. They learn how to manipulate the game and manipulate the defense to where they're going to get their shot, they're going to get their pass, they're going to get the best thing for their team and what it needs. And I think Ant's still learning that because he's still so young. And he's on an accelerated course of study on it. And I think the leap that he's made this year, taking more threes, passing out of double teams, those kind of things, is actually really good for his long-term development to not just be an elite production player. That will come with time and efficiency, because his mid-range shooting isn't great this year. But learning how to control the game like this with these kind of stakes will do more for him reaching true greatness than a more consistent statistical profile will.
I agree 100%. And figuring out how to keep putting his imprints on the game while he's doing the facilitating part, right? Like you said with Jokic, he's controlling the game. Not ever going to expect Anthony Edwards to hit Jokic levels of like always got your fingerprints on everything that's happening. But there are times when Anthony Edwards just sort of disappears and you're like, what's like, I don't want him just standing in the corner for a couple possessions. I'd rather him force the issue with a drive and kick as opposed to just sort of being part of the machinery, and Minnesota's offense just sort of dies for 3 straight minutes while he's on the court. To your point, that's the learning process that he's coming into. And the thing that blows me away with Ant, I've called him the most talented player in the NBA just because I don't think this is talked about enough. He said that people are like, oh, how did you become such a great 3-point shooter? And he was basically like, I watched Damian Lillard and then just took his jumper and started doing that. And I'm like, if it was that simple, every NBA player would just watch Steph, Clay, or Damian Lillard and just become the best 3-point shooter in the league. And the fact that he's able to just watch and learn quite literally and just apply that to his own profile and just start doing it within a matter of, I don't know, months, weeks. I don't know how long it took. That's crazy. And then there was another quote earlier where he started really developing, okay, how am I going to attack these double teams? I'm getting trapped on these on-ball screens. How am I going to kind of get my way out of it? And he had some incredible plays in that game against Denver doing exactly that. And somebody asked him about it the other day, and he was like, oh, I watched Luka. And I'm like, okay, here we go again. He just watches. He's like NBA Kirby. He just like it sucks up a guy and then adopts that player's powers. It's absolutely wild, and that's why I think like if that's what talent is, I think we have a hard time defining what talent is. But if talent is your threshold for getting better and your absolute ceiling and the things that you're able to accomplish on the court, or you're at least able to potentially accomplish on the court, I don't know that anybody has a higher threshold than what Anthony Edwards can do just based on his watch and learn ability, and then obviously all the innate physical attributes and all that crazy stuff too. But it's just absolutely wild. So it's exciting to see him continue down that. And just figure out what else he's going to add to his game next year. Like, is he just who can he watch and take? Like, pick one player, and you're like, now you get to have that. It feels like it could be anything for Ant.
Yeah, and I think for me, a lot of that is like it's the care too is the thing that gets me. Is it's very I think it's very easy with how demanding the NBA schedule is, and to be a player at his age at 23 making the money that he is. To be like, yeah, I'm studying Luka Doncic on how to get better at double teams. Yeah, I'm studying Damian Lillard how to improve my, because there's a lot of guys that are just like, I know who I am.
Right.
And that's it.
I was the number one pick. I got here doing this. Why would I stop doing it this way?
Right. And the care to be like, I want to go as far as I possibly can. It matters a lot. Now, there's a lot of guys that have had success. Like KD and Russ were both wired the same way, which is like, I do me. And I'm awesome. And that worked for them for, they both won MVPs. They both had great runs. KD won several championships, like all that. But I do think that like taking that approach of how can I get the absolute most out of my career? That's how you can reach a level of greatness that extends even beyond your talent, because otherwise you're dependent on talent and the bounce of the ball. And Ant's doing stuff that gets him way further than that. And I think that's really impressive.
Let's get into our tiers. You texted me. You wanted to talk about teams that accomplished their goals. We do these every month with a different theme. So explain the theme a little bit more in this one.
Yeah, so like we're at the end of the season. We got 8 games left. You can't change your fortunes. It's not like if you make the playoffs or miss the playoffs, it's a huge determining factor. Like, yeah, we made the playoffs, but we're the 6th seed, whatever. So, like, did you accomplish what you wanted? And this is going to be one that we're going to have good teams and bad teams mixed in tiers, because some teams wanted to be bad. And so you're going to find kind of those opportunities to put those mixed tiers in. But a lot of it is like, look, you go into the season with priorities about how you want to play, what kind of team you want to be, what accomplishments you want to have, how many wins do you want to reach? Are you going to be are you going to feel like you're a championship contender by the end? Or did you develop your talent? Did you get better? Do you have a path going forward? Did you find that the coach is the one that you want, etc.? And those are very different things, but it also just kind of means like there's a scale here of how much did you accomplish what you wanted to this season?
Right.
Did you reach your expectations for what you wanted to do? Because sometimes some of these teams, it's going to be like, yeah, they didn't reach it. It's not their fault. It just didn't happen for them. And that's way different to me than an abject failure where it's like you set high goals and instead you sucked. And then the Suns tier, so to speak. The top tier is distinguished excellence. And that's like, you not only met your expectations, you flew by them. And you are not only as good as you wanted to be, you are better. And you didn't just get the guys you wanted, but you went way further than that. Or in the case of one team, you wanted to be bad, you were absolutely awful, but you've also found some stuff that makes you a little bit optimistic going forward. So we got 4 great teams and 1 awful team. I've got Cavaliers, your Oklahoma City Thunder, the Detroit Pistons, the Houston Rockets, and the Washington Wizards, because nothing makes more sense than putting those 4 teams with the Wizards sticking out like a sore thumb.
I love this. No notes on this tier. We can get into them. We'll start with the Cavs, just because they were first. Yeah, head coaching change, and you got exactly what you wanted out of it, right? You went from 18th in the league in half-court offense last year to first in half-court offense. That's not even... You were just trying to probably get into the top 10, right? In the half-court offense if you're the Cavs. Like, hey, we just can't suck at this. We have Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, a lot of talented players. We added Max Strus a couple years ago. Like, we should be a lot better in the half-court than 18th. Let's make a head coaching change here. And there's other reasons behind that change too, but that was a big part of it. Not only did you get good, you became the best at it, which is pretty phenomenal. And I love everything that he's done. And he didn't do it, I think, Matt, in the most obvious ways. I think everybody was just like, well, Evan Mobley has to start shooting threes, and then you probably have to stagger Garland and Mitchell more, and then that'll figure it out. And Kenny Atkinson walked in, and he was like, not so much, not really. I'm actually going to swap out my staggers. I'm going to actually ask Donovan Mitchell who he wants to play with. And turns out it's Evan Mobley. So we're going to pair Mitchell and Mobley instead of Mitchell and Allen like Bickerstaff did last year. And then Garland and Allen will be paired in more of a traditional sort of pick and roll partnership. And so we'll have those two-man lineups kind of throughout the game. But we're also going to play Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland a lot. And when we do, we're going to empower Evan Mobley not to just stand in the corner and make threes, but to be a playmaker, a passer, a guy who could force the issue. I love the way that Atkinson has just empowered everybody in those lineups. He's experimented with some different lineups. And all of it has worked, and obviously the Cavs' success speaks for itself.
Yeah, and I think you wanted to get a coach that would get the best out of not only your team but your players, and he's done that to an absolute T. And winning this many games and all that kind of things is great, but also like the process has been really awesome, and they've gotten better as the year has gone on, which to me is extremely impressive. Like right up until the point where it's like, yeah, it's probably time for us to ramp down. They were improving defensively. They were starting to sharpen up on that end. Getting the buy-in from everybody, adding the pieces that they wanted, making a trade for DeAndre Hunter to get you a piece that might put you over the top. All of those things I think contribute to this, and there's no question this is the year when everything went right for the Cavs. And even beyond all of that, you can definitively say from a regular season perspective, which the playoffs can tell a different story, and sometimes that's really tough, but from a regular season perspective, you wanted to see, can these four guys be the core of a championship level team? And the regular season part of that resume has been proven. We'll see what the playoffs provide, because it is different. But I always say, like, you can only do what you can. Like, you can only do what's in front of you. Like, they've answered the questions we wanted answered. How good can you be? Pretty good. Can Donovan Mitchell, really take a team to that kind of level? Not only can he, but he can also share with Darius Garland. Right. Can Evan Mobley make a leap into being an elite, multifaceted player? Yep. Like, boxes checked all the way around.
Yeah. So they might get knocked down a peg here if they do anything short of reach the Eastern Conference Finals. But as long as they make the Eastern Conference Finals this year, I think has been a success. As disappointing as it might be given their success in the regular season, like obviously there's championship expectations in Cleveland, but from the outside looking in, Eastern Conference Finals, that's a good result for the season. It can't be really looked as a disappointment. At least I don't think. The Pistons, another team that made the head coaching change, grabbed Bickerstaff. He's been awesome. Obviously, they have a foundation, a plan. It was like a really low bar where they were coming from. But is that really it? Is the fact that they went from whatever it was, 14, 17 wins, whatever it was last year, to now being maybe the 5th or 6th seed in the East, plus the Cade Cunningham story, him really emerging here?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of stories here, which is like Jaden Ivey was looking like a legit number 2 before his injury, and he might come back here by the end of the season. You got Jalen Duren really kind of like developing on his own. The fact that they've gotten, again, they're kind of like the Cavs. I thought they would win. I love their over. They're my favorite win total over, but I kept saying, like, I'm not betting playoffs. They're not going to make the playoffs. They're going to win like 32 games. Nope. Like, the fact that they kept getting better and better and better and better and better, and they've gotten better defensively, and they've made all of this work. They've gotten internal development. You have to feel good about Ron Holland. You have to feel good about Asar Thompson. You have to feel good about these guys. And Cade's made this leap. So from a process perspective, even if they hadn't won this many games and made the playoffs, you would still be like, mission accomplished. But the fact that they've gotten Cade on top of that, and it's like, look, they're kind of the team that everybody's like, I don't know, man. I don't know if you want to play them in a playoff series. That's the best thing to be if you're in this spot. They are officially the team that's like, well, if they lose, well, sure, they haven't been in the playoffs before. Cade's never done this. They're so young. And if they win, it's like, look out. This team is on the rise. Cade's going to be an MVP candidate going into next season. This is an awesome time to be a Pistons fan. They've gone above and beyond any sort of reasonable expectation.
I love Ron Holland, man.
He's so
like
good.
I like the pick even when they made it, and I know that I'm sort of a lot of people are like, why would you take him? You have spacing concerns. He can't shoot, and I'm like, the Pistons stink. Who cares about fit? Just grab the talent. If you think that guy's the best player available, just go get him. Worry about fit later. Who cares about fit? But he's actually been a good fit, and they figured it out. And maybe this is just a symptom of me covering the Miami Heat and being around that team for as long as I've been. But I love dudes who care a lot and just really care about winning basketball games.
I thought you were going to say you covered the Heat a long time, so you're fascinated with anybody being built around through the draft. So
right, you know me, big draft guy here. But the fact that he looks like he's like maybe on the brink of tears after every loss, and I mean that in the best possible way. I freaking love that. I love his competitiveness, and I think he's only going to get better. And can't push him around, that's for sure. Also, Thunder. I mean, I don't really know how much we have to say about this team.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about it. It's pretty obvious. I think the only thing I think is they've built a team that if they fail in the playoffs, it will be patently obvious why. That like you can't justify, like last year was one of those tough ones where it's like, look, if PJ Washington doesn't go supernova, we go to the conference finals.
Right.
If Lou Dort could hit a three, an open three as a 39% shooter, if Isaiah Joe could knock down shots. This year, if that happens, it's like, all right, we're going to need to go get a shooter. Like we got to go get Cam Johnson or another shooter. Like we're just going to have to go get that wing and solidify some of this talent. Also, there are all these little things with them where it's like Isaiah Joe's gotten so much better about running the second unit. Casey Wallace has proven that he's like just as good. Like he's amongst everyone was like, oh my God, they got Alex Caruso. And I at the time was like, I don't know, man. They still got Casey Wallace. Like it's good to have redundancy, but he's pretty freaking good. And now he really is like on that level of like, you got Alex Caruso and Casey Wallace. They've gotten things like J-Dub. I have made the numbers back a case for Shai for DPOY that's not real. Dort is probably if I had a vote, Dort would be my DPOY.
Same.
But if you blend the two of the numbers and the tape, you do wind up being like Jalen Williams doesn't have Lou Dort's assignment, but Jalen Williams may do the most stuff defensively for the Thunder. And that's wild.
Yeah, Dort consistently has the most difficult assignment, right? On a night-to-night basis over the course of the season. Jalen Williams had the most difficult assignment this season when he had to play center for like a week straight. And he's been awesome. He should be on. He's not going to be the DPOY. Like I think Dort has been the most important defender on the best defense. But and by the way, it's not one of those cases. Well, maybe it is, but I don't think it's a case where, oh, Dort's just doing it because he's got a bunch of really good defenders around him.
Nice.
I think that whole defense falls apart if not for Dort. And they wouldn't be like bad, but they wouldn't be where they are, like leading them to all-time greatness right now in terms of regular season stuff. But Jalen Williams should be on one of the all-defensive teams, or at least he'll be on the short list of guys who should be considered for that. But in terms of the Thunder also, all the things you mentioned, they're going to win 125-plus games over 2 seasons. That's
Jesus
insane. They're going to win more than 76% of their games. Like that's what we're talking about over a 2-game or a 2-season stretch. And I didn't know that SGA had this leap. I mean, obviously he was on MVP ballots last year, and I remember coming out of last season, I'm like, if this is what SGA just ends up being, which is sort of in that Brunson zone of 3rd, 4th, 5th on your MVP ballots, but he's never going to be the best player in the league. Right. That's still a really good player, and you could still win a championship with that player, right? Like Boston, Tatum, maybe you could argue maybe he's in that space also, but nope, he just blew right past that, and there's an argument to be made that he's now in that top tier, and he's probably going to win MVP this year. But I started thinking about like SGA in a broader sense here, and ESPN had this stat the other day in one of their articles, is 40 of the 45 champions had at least one of 14 players on their roster. Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Julius Erving, Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, Shaq, Tim Duncan, Kobe, Kevin Garnett, Dirk, LeBron, Steph, Giannis, Jokic. And then you've got Tatum last year and maybe again this year potentially. You look at that list historically, you need one of the great players on your team to win a championship for the most part. We also usually have at least 2 of these guys in the league at the same time during their primes at the same time. And obviously, one of them right now is Jokic. You could argue maybe Giannis, even though his future is a little bit murky here. LeBron and Steph are still in the league, but I wouldn't consider them in their primes right now, although they're both arguably still top 10 players. But when you look at like who's the next guy to join that list, I think a year ago, most of us would have just said Luka. Maybe it's SGA. Because of not only his individual greatness, but also the team is just built to win right now. And like you said, if they don't win, the reason why is going to be really obvious. Good thing for the Thunder is they have the means to fix that issue almost immediately because of all the trade assets and the things that they can move this summer if they wanted to do that. So I this is a really interesting year in terms of like what this means for the future of the league and what it means specifically for SGA. He's got the potential to crack this type of conversation.
He's entering the biggest jump part of his career. He's entering like he's 26. Like between 27 and 30 is when you really figure out all of the like the things that take you to another level, and he's gonna win MVP. I mean, it's ridiculous. His scoring, his ability to get downhill. There's a lot that he's gonna get so much better, I think, as a passer. He's not a great passer right now. He's fine. He's not bad. He's fine. And I think that he's just like consistently he's about all of the things that if you're an organization you want. And that's one of the things I think is really great in this league right now is that there's so many guys. That's why the Luka conversation is a little fascinating because it's like every Nuggets staffer, GM, executive, coach, assistant coach, trainer, player, everybody is like Jokic is about the absolute right things. Like you love the work ethic and what he brings to the game. The Bucks feel the same way about Giannis. Mm-hmm. And the Thunder feel the same way about SGA. And to me, that's like really important for building what you want to. And it's going to that helps with sustainability when you have a guy like that at the very core of it.
He gives Steph vibes, just like about the team, all that kind of stuff, all that kind of thing. We could touch on the Wizards and the Rockets really quickly, but just the Wizards thing, like who's your favorite player? They're kind of fun. Like who's your favorite young player?
I like Corey Kispert a lot. I love Keyshawn George. Same. I love Keyshawn George.
Yeah.
He is it. That is a guy that like I am all the way in on. He is under the radar doing like go really dive in and look at the stuff and it is so promising for him. He's going to be good. You gotta love Bilal. I like Bilal. Mm-hmm. If they don't trade Middleton next year and they keep this roster and they add a top 4 pick, the Washington Wizards are going to win 30 plus games next year.
Love the prediction.
That's my pick.
Keyshawn, I was a big Keyshawn George. He was one of my guys going into the draft. I think I had him like in the top 20 on my board. Everybody, you read the scouting reports and they're like, this guy can't play defense. I'm like, I don't know. This guy tries really hard. Am I missing something? Like I've watched a bunch of the tape. I kind of liked it. AJ Johnson, who came over from Milwaukee in that deal, sneakily nice addition there. They've really liked him in Washington. So that's a nice little other pick that they picked up there. Houston Rockets, to me, Why do you have them so high, at least in distinguished excellence? Is it just because, hey, they proved that they're in the playoffs? That was really it?
I mean, my numbers vary on where they're going to wind up because their schedule is so tough. There's two things. One, they're very likely to have home court in the first round. And being a playoff team and being a top 4 is a different kind of deal. And if they get to top 3, it's like, look, the history of the league says that the true contenders come from that top 3. Now, I don't think the Rockets are true contenders, but they're in a better spot than those other teams because teams that are past 3 don't win the title. They just don't. It's happened twice in the history of the league. You make the finals, but you can't win it. The bigger thing for me is Jalen Green's played himself into a position where it's like, you're no longer like, yikes, did we give a big money contract to a bust that's going to do nothing but eat up our salary space? It's like, no, he's a good player. There's some upside there. If you need to trade him, you can, because another team will be like, all right, yeah, we'll take Jalen. That's good. The bigger thing for me, honestly, is Amen Thompson. That's the bigger thing to me is like, I watch Amen Thompson and it's not just the defensive stuff. It's the playmaking. He's going to improve on the offensive side, shooting the ball. And when he, and that's the big question mark. Maybe he doesn't. I see a guy that can be, if not a 1A, then a 1B, then a heck of a 1B. And that to me takes them a lot further because entering into last year, I was like, I don't know. Like entering into this year, I was like, I don't know if they have 1A. I don't know if they have 1B. I don't know if they have 1C. I don't know if they have a 2. I don't know if they have a 3. Like, I don't know. And now I am very comfortably like, no. Amen Thompson can be at worst the 3rd best player on a championship team, probably the 2nd best player on a championship team, possibly the best player on a championship team. If he hits the furthest limit of his potential, that's how good he can be. Şengün is difficult for me. I was lower on him early and then did some work on him and was higher. And now it's like, he's gotten the recognition and I'm kind of like, there's a lot of flaws here that he's not addressing. So it's been a little bit of a roller coaster. I still think the best move for them is to trade Jalen Green and build around Amen and probably Şengün as like a third guy and try and fill out the rest of it that way. But like, I think when you look at how competitive they've been, their record versus great teams, if they were just like they beat the snot out of bad teams because they work harder than you, I wouldn't have them this high. But they're not. They legit go into OKC and they'll get a win. They'll legit go into these great buildings and get a win. They're not scared of the Warriors. They're not scared of the Lakers. They will go in your building and they will take your lunch money. And that to me is a different level, which is why I have them being in distinguished excellence.
Yeah, Udoka's got to be part of the coach of the year conversation because of that. He's imbued this confidence in his personality on the team, which really matters. Coach of the year isn't all about just sidelines out of bounds plays, NBA Twitter. It's about culture and things like that. Again, I covered the Miami Heat too long. Love the Rockets. I agree 100% with everything you said on Amen Thompson. Like, there is no ceiling for this guy. I'm 100% with you there. Quick little thought exercise. If the Grizzlies called... I'll reverse that. If the Rockets called the Grizzlies and offered Jalen Green for Ja Morant, what do you think happens?
Memphis says no.
I think Memphis says no, even though Jalen Green, sneaky, super durable guy.
Yep. I think I don't know that I don't think it's an absolute the Jaws with the Grizzlies through the summer. I think that that's still a volatile situation. But the part of what has to be accounted for here is the investor value and what he means to the city of Memphis. And they recognize that in a way that the Mavericks did not with Luka.
You're right.
And so if they do that deal, it's going to have to be like they got a home run of a trade on a team that was like, we need Ja specifically. And they got the whole package that the Mavericks didn't get for Luka, where it's like you got the young prospect and you got the money relief and you got the veterans and you got the draft picks. Like if they get that, then it's a different kind of conversation based off of the money that they're going to have to pay Ja. But I don't think that Jalen Green is going to fit that bill. Instead, it's like more Jalen Green to me is more like, hey, if you call it the Kings and we're like, hey, we'll give you Jalen Green for Zach LaVine if you send over a protected first.
Mm-hmm.
The Kings are maybe like, all right. Yeah, we'll invest in Jalen Green. Yeah, that's the kind of deal that I think that's the level.
I'm not even sure. Does Houston even do that? You know what I mean? Because of Morant's availability issues and some of the questions with him, they're like, okay, is this the big move that we want to move? Push in? It's just the thought I had. Next tier.
Mission accomplished. Met expectations. No questions. Not a problem. Didn't go above and beyond. You're not like this year could not have gone better, but you're perfectly satisfied with what happened. The Celtics, the Lakers, the Warriors, and the Clippers. So let's go bottom up. The Clippers, win total was in the 30s. That got to be too low. The hope was like, hey, maybe we can be competitive until Kawhi gets back. And instead it was like, we have an elite defense and we're really competitive. And then when Kawhi got back, it's, when Kawhi is with us, we play genuinely like a top level team that can take out anybody. And that to me is like, you got to feel like that's a check mark. Given the situation, letting Paul George go and getting better is objectively a win. Like there's just no other way around it. It was a big gamble. I disagree with it at the time. I can't deny the results on both sides. Been a big win. Norman Powell made a big jump. Zoo has been a DPOY candidate and a most improved player candidate. Chris Dunn is a revelation on defense. They've got a lot of contributions from a lot of guys. Reshaped the roster too. Moved out some sluff and added in some more guys that you can really believe in and trust. Harden's been his not usual self, but he's been totally good. Very much a positive.
The best version of what Harden could be at this stage of his career.
Yeah,
that's what we've gotten.
And so like you can't complain at all if you're a Clippers fan. Yeah. So I think the Clippers got to be here.
I think you and we did over-unders going into this season, and I think both of us had a slight. I think we thought the Clippers were being undervalued. I don't remember if we took the over or the under on it, but I ended up for some reason, and I usually take the under on all things Clippers. I'm a Clippers, whatever the opposite. I'm a Clippers skeptic, always ever since I got Kawhi. But I was still a little bit like 32 wins or whatever it was. Yeah. Like, what are we talking about with the Clippers here? Like, if you just go back to when they first got Kawhi and Paul George, everybody was like, oh my God, this team is going to be so good. They have two superstars and whatever. Then they add a third superstar, quote unquote, in Harden. And then they lose one in Paul George. And I'm like, well, this team still has two stars, quote unquote, two stars. And then the supporting cast has never been better, right? They added a bunch of really good players in the off, or really helpful players at least in the offseason. I don't know. I was like, this team doesn't suck. Like they're not a title contender anymore, but they don't stink the way that maybe a team that lost somebody like Paul George for nothing, quote unquote nothing, you would think that team would stink. I don't know. I like them. I think they have the best supporting cast they've ever had since Kawhi got there. I think this team is kind of better than some of those Paul George teams.
Yeah.
And Zubac has been awesome. Like Zubac has been a legitimate top 5 center in the league this year, and he's been irreplaceable. Should we do a little Celtics talk here?
We can.
Just feels as long as they get to the playoffs healthy, mission accomplished, right?
I mean, for me, it's like they have maintained the ability for 3 to be greater than 2. Cool. Mm-hmm. Like, I will just say that I am less impressed than the Celtics fans are with this team. It's not that I'm not impressed with them. It's not that I don't think that they're contenders. It's not like I'm like, you're overrated and you're going to lose. You're overrated and you can win the NBA title is what I think. They're good. They're good at what they do. And what they do is shoot threes. And that's how they win. Tatum's good. There was an argument the other day about how vital Tatum is to the Celtics, about how important he is to the Celtics, like relative to Shai for an MVP kind of like, well, I'm just saying, which is it's stupid, but I get it. I get it. Tatum was on my ballot for the straw poll. Tatum could vanish off the face of the earth. He could get snapped by Thanos and they would still be really good, borderline elite because of the system Mazzulla has put in. Like this is a talent neutral system that has been developed. I don't know if I agree. It's not skill neutral. You have to have the skill, but like Peyton Pritchard, Luke Cornett, Sam Hauser, come on, man. Like it doesn't matter. They don't have the same restraints that other teams do because they don't let you shoot threes and they shoot a ton of them. And that's how they win. It doesn't have to mean that like if they couldn't shift to something else, like they still have a lot of skills. Like Pritchard's a really good passer. He's really good in pick and roll. Sam Hauser's a surprisingly good defender. Luke Cornett's a great pick and roll finisher. Drew Holiday's showing some stuff late in the season. Horford continues to be fantastic, right? They have all these really, really talented players and they could be something else. But that to me is the kind of the key. Is like if they had another coach, they might look like something else and be just as good because they are really talented. But that's not why they win. They win because of the math that they create. That is who they are.
I'm going to push back, and I can't believe you've made me do this to defend the Celtics. So congrats. I'm going to push back a little bit. I think Tatum is extremely important to what they do, and I don't think it would work without him. I don't think that you could just put Brown or Derek White in that position.
I don't think it works in a playoff perspective. Wes, but come on. You don't think that they can beat like the Hawks?
Oh, sure. They could probably still win 45 games without Tatum. The thing with Tatum is he plays every single night.
He does.
And
he does.
Nobody else
is really underrated.
Yeah, nobody else does on that team, really. And he's quietly turned into one of the best decision makers in the league. And I think that's really the key of what makes that whole system work. It's not just that they get up a bunch of threes, they limit turnovers. You're not going to get extra possessions off of them to kind of narrow that 3-point math. That's a big part of the whole formula is we're going to shoot a bunch of threes, but you're not going to get us to turn the ball over. We're not going to foul a bunch and all that stuff. And Tatum is sort of the avatar for all of that. I don't know if it works without him. But I'm not going to debate that he's more important than SGA. Like that's.
But even then, think about the turnover thing, right? It's like the turnover thing is still in service of the main concept.
Yeah,
what's the most important thing? Get up at 3. If you turn the ball over, you can't get up at 3.
Right.
Like again, I don't think that last year's team was like this. This year they've leaned so far into the bit.
Yes.
Like it is. They're so far into it.
Yeah.
That it's like you can't really distinguish between it anymore. And like they may look like a totally different team in the playoffs. And like I'm not going to sit here and act like they are bad at 2-pointers. No, they're really good at 2-pointers. Like they put so much pressure on you. And Tatum's excellent at slips. Like Tatum's awesome. He's so good. But Jaylen Brown's had a down year. Drew Holiday's been, I think, pretty bad for most of the year. Kristaps Porzingis missed most of the year, and honestly has been probably like below expectation in most of his games.
Mm-hmm.
But who's been awesome this year for the Celtics? Derek White and Peyton Pritchard. And what do those guys do? They knock down timely open threes. That's who they are.
The Drew Holiday thing. I know you're not allowed to say anything bad about Drew Holiday because we've all
That's my
agreed
big like that
that contract is not going to age well.
if he shows up in the playoffs and he shoots 40% from 3-point range from the corners again, they're going to win the title. If he does not, things are going to get tight. That's really what
they can't. I don't think they can afford for Porzingis to just miss the entire Eastern Conference part of the bracket this year either. And so everybody keeps saying like, the Celtics are gonna have to cut costs, right? And it's like, okay, cool. How?
Yeah.
Like everybody loves Drew Holiday. Everybody loves Kristaps Porzingis on this Celtics team. What team out there is trading for 4 more years of Drew Holiday at this age at $30+ million a year? I don't know that the list is very long. I'm sure somebody might, but in this CBA, it's hard. Ditto for Kristaps. So, that's why you kind of have those Jaylen Brown rumors out there, but we're not going to do that today. I'm surprised the Lakers aren't higher because they got Luka. Like, do you just not give them credit for that? Because
they don't get credit. They don't get credit for it.
Totally fair.
So I think like they get to mission accomplished because it's two things. The goal this year was to compete for a championship, and they are a championship contender, and was hopefully to figure out a path forward for their long-term future. And I think the idea going in was like, well, figure out that Anthony Davis can be the best player on their team, and he was that for some of the year.
Yeah.
And instead now they got Luka. So it's like mission accomplished. You've ruined the league again with your nonsense. And
don't blame them for that though.
And they'll win 3 championships over the next 7 years, at least. And that's just how it goes. So it's like mission accomplished. I don't know that you can really look at. I also think like you prove that coaching was a major limitation for the roster last year.
Yeah,
and
JJ's been good.
And that JJ is an upgrade. That it's viable. That hiring the podcaster was the right move. And I thought JJ was the right hire. Was a good hire.
Always hire the podcaster. Always.
And then also like they traded out a bunch of non-NBA players and got a bunch of NBA players in. Like Dorian Finney-Smith is an NBA player. And removing D'Angelo Russell has made it to where like, oh yeah, Gabe Vincent's good again because he's playing serious basketball. Like that to me is totally fine. I don't think you can do distinguished excellence because their profile just doesn't scream like this is an elite squad. It's more like they're really good at like a bunch of stuff, but they're also real weird, and you don't know what you're gonna get every night. So to me, mission accomplished is where they land.
Agree with you. Speaking of not knowing what you're gonna get every night, the Golden State Warriors. I understand why they're on this. Like they're again part of that contending conversation. Their goal, basically, since last summer, was to trade for a star. Mission accomplished. You got Jimmy Butler. I'm assuming you're not putting them up a tier, or just what do you make of the Warriors? I suppose. Why are they here?
Steph wanted to play meaningful basketball, and they're playing meaningful basketball, and they'll play meaningful basketball in April.
Yeah.
They're not gonna be in the play-in tournament. They're not gonna go home early. They'll either have a lead or be 2-2 in a playoff series, maybe 2. They can make a conference finals. I don't think they can go further than that. I don't think they're as legitimate as this run suggests that they are. I just don't buy it. I'm also a Jimmy Butler skeptic though, so I think he is more myth than reality. And so you got to feel pretty good about it. Kuminga's been good. If they pay him, I don't know what that looks like. Don't love that idea. Draymond hasn't gotten suspended for a long duration. That's a win.
Yep.
The noise around Kerr has settled down, which I think is significant and helpful for their overall kind of progress. So I just am kind of like, it was a good year. I don't think that they were like loaded up to be like championship or bust. It was more like, let's get into the conversation and see if we can make some noise and pull off something because we have Steph Curry, and that's what they've done.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not buying them as a legitimate contender, but that doesn't even matter to me for them. That's not when you're talking about the goals of the season. It was just make sure that we're not in the play-in tournament every year at best. And right now, for Steph Curry, it's not about accomplishments anymore. It's about moments. It's about 52 points on a Tuesday night in April. It's about just capturing that magic every once in a while that just enraptures the entire NBA viewing world for nights at a time. And now we have an opportunity to watch Steph have more playoff moments. There's nothing more enjoyable, arguably, in the NBA than watching Draymond Green and Steph Curry play meaningful basketball in the playoff stage. Now we get to have that for a little bit. And that's it. That's all we wanted. That's all anybody ever wanted. And truthfully, I think that's all the Warriors really wanted. And truthfully, I think it's the only thing that Steph really wanted. He basically just said at the end of last season, all I want to do is a chance. All I want is a chance to compete. And now he does. Now he has a chance to play in 7-game series. You mentioned Kuminga. I've never been the biggest Kuminga guy. I hated that they drafted him. I thought it was a terrible basketball fit. I didn't think that they had the player development staff. I was covering the Warriors at the time. I'm like, you don't have the means to develop this guy. Not to toot my own horn and take a victory lap on it, but I think I was right. I'm, again, not the biggest Kuminga guy. I've sold whatever stock I've had. I'm out. I'm out on this guy. He can't shoot, doesn't play team defense, doesn't rebound unless you really ask him to and beg him to, and then even then maybe he gets around to it. And he's got no feel for the game. I'm out. I'm just out on this guy. I wouldn't pay him. You might have to if you're Golden State. Like, I get it. The situation is what it is. I'm just out. But you said he's been good.
He does dribble in a line really hard. So,
so he's got that going for him.
He's got that going for him.
Next tier.
Passes inspection. So there's a very fine line here between passes inspection and came up just short. And passes inspection is,
I like those.
Could it have been better? Yeah. Are you unhappy with it? No.
Right.
Are you where you wanted to be? Not in an ideal world. Are you unhappy with where you are? Not really. We're good. This is fine. This is all right. You're not like, yeah, we did what we set out to do. We may not have gone above and beyond, but we were where that's the tier above. This one is could have been better, but it's fine. Like, still feel pretty good about things. And if we have a good playoff run in particular, depending on, or in one case, a particularly great draft outcome, then it's worth it. And you can walk away, like, there is a potential for this season for you to walk away feeling good.
So you've got 4 teams in this tier.
The Pacers, the Raptors, the Timberwolves, and the Jazz. So we got 2 tankers and 2 fringe contenders.
Let's start with the Pacers.
So Indiana, no one is like Tyrese Halliburton is a bum anymore because that was moronic. And everyone's like, oh, okay, yeah, all right. Tyrese Halliburton's really good. Pascal Siakam's had, I think, a phenomenal borderline All-NBA season.
Yep.
They haven't solved the problem with Miles Turner's contract and what they're going to have to do with that this summer and figuring that whole thing out. But you do have to feel good about stuff like Jarris Walker's shown that he can contribute. They've gotten another good season out of Bennett Mathurin overall. Nembhard, another great season, wasn't just a good playoff run. They do have a lot of talent. And the fact that they were able to get to a place where it's like, hey, our offense isn't insane, but also our defense isn't terrible.
Right.
It's not bad, borderline pretty good at times.
Right.
It's a huge development. They're a lot more balanced this season. So I look at that and I just kind of walk away being like, does Indiana wish that they had the season where they wound up as like the 3 seed? Do they wish that they were like on the tier of the Knicks in terms of win-loss and advanced metrics? Probably. But they're still very much, the goal was do not regress from being that dangerous team that can screw with you and cause chaos, which is what they were last year. And they're still that team. They're still the team that I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, you better take care of business in game 1 versus the Pacers, because if they go up 1-0 on you, even if you're the Cavs, things can get weird very quickly because this team's nuts. And I love that about them. And so the Pacers, I think, have passed inspection.
Yeah, if I'm Boston and Cleveland, the one team I don't want to see right now in the playoffs is the Pacers.
Yep. That's
the team that freaks me out. They've been great. To me, I think they're the 3rd best team in the Eastern Conference. To your point, it would have been nice if they would have shown that earlier in the year, but they were also dealing with some injuries. Since January 1st, basically when they got Nembhard back and Nesmith back and healthy, and they kind of got back into playing shape. Since January 1st, they're 28-13. They're 7th in offensive rating, 12th in defensive rating. They have a good record against good teams, which has been sort of the Pacers thing for a couple of years now. So to your point, Matt, like, the whole idea was just don't be the Hawks from a couple of years ago and just be like, that was cool, and then regress back to the play-in tournament. It was, hey, establish yourself this year as one of the top teams. Like, we're just going to be here teams in the East in terms of being in the home court advantage in the first round. And to me, I think they more than established that. It's like, yep, Halliburton's awesome. He fits with Siakam. The supporting cast is great and super underrated. They're just going to be here. They're just going to be here for a while. And as long as you're there, you got a chance.
Yeah. Wolves are better than the record.
Yep.
A lot of it's like, you have to decide, do you believe in their now 11-11 record versus in games decided by 3 points or less. That's so many more than everybody else in the league. Is ridiculous. They played 22 games decided by 3 points or less. Are you kidding me? And those outcomes are going to always be very coin flippy.
Right.
So they're probably better than this when you look at the advanced metrics. So the metrics were on the other side and they were like, yeah, they're not that good. They're just winning a bunch of, like, they've won more games than they should have. I would feel differently, but it doesn't. The profile is like, no. Like, they're super dangerous. They match up well with OKC. They match up well with Denver. They match up well with the Lakers. They match up well with the Warriors. They match up well with all these teams. Ant is a monster. The Julius thing took a while, but they've figured it out. Like, Chris Finch, that front office and that coaching staff deserve so much credit for taking moves that were all like, this cannot work. And then being like, actually,
right.
if you work at it, it can.
Yeah. If you have a plan.
They've gotten such great development of their young guys like Jalen Clark, guys like Josh Minot, who was great for them last night. They have a really deep bench. They got a lot of guys that they can play if they need to in certain situations. I was deeply concerned about the Jaden McDaniel situation the first half of the year. He's turned a corner, has played great over the last 3 months of the season. The Wolves were the number 3 seed and were like, hey, they could win the title. They looked like a title contender last year. This year, they look like you're not going to feel great in any matchup picking against them. You're not going to feel good. Like, if it's OKC, people are going to be like, yeah, OKC's probably going to win. And it's like, and so that's like a good spot for you to be. It's hard to replicate the kind of year that they had last year. The Cavs won't be as good next year. Like, they just won't be as good next year. The Thunder won't probably won't be as good next year. But like, the Wolves have managed to put themselves back into a position where it's like, yeah, they're super dangerous. And their records and their numbers, their resume says they're way better than their record. That's a good spot to be in. It's not as good as you want it to be, but it's not a bad spot. So they pass inspection.
Yeah, and you can't talk about what the goal for this Timberwolves season is without connecting it to the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. And you already mentioned the Julius Randle part of this, and it was a really rough start. I don't think anybody was surprised by that. You traded for this guy the night before training camp opened, and it was just sort of building the airplane in the air ever since. But it's starting to come along. A lot of credit to Julius Randle. He's been really deferential. He's kind of figured out his spots. He hasn't forced it. And I don't think that the numbers have caught up with the eye test in terms of some of the on-off stuff. But lately, it's Julius Randle really adds something. He was really good in that Denver game as a small ball 5 at times. Even though, everybody was fouling Nikola Jokic in that game. But he's also good with the other main starters next to him. Like, the numbers with Ant are good. The numbers with Gobert are good. The numbers with Naz Reid have been good. And I think that's really important that he's learning to play with those guys. And he's probably going to opt into his contract next year because it's $33 million. Why not? But even if he doesn't, are we sure that the Timberwolves would be like, yeah, see ya? I mean, maybe just because of the payroll stuff, but I don't know. It's really interesting. You mentioned the Raptors. I hate this Raptors team so much.
I know.
I know why they're here, right? Because you can't put them higher because they lost, but they didn't really lose enough. But congrats, they officially, I think, clinched a spot not in the play-in last year, if we want to word it that way, or last night. I still just don't know what they have that's worth building on. I have no idea what Scotty Barnes is. He's now shooting under 30% from 3 for his entire career. He's billed as this sort of playmaker defensive guy. Defensively, I think he's still really good. Playmaker, his assist to turnover ratio is just meh. Like, he doesn't, like, there's some passes here and there, but he doesn't wow me consistently on that end. Yeah. And we can get to some other stuff here, but to me, I'm just like, what do we have here exactly?
So I think here's a good question. Would you rather be in the spot? Let's take the rest of the team context out of it. Would you rather be in the spot Charlotte is with LaMelo or the spot the Raptors are in with Scotty? And I would rather be in the position the Raptors are in with Scotty, because Scotty can get good at so many things. And LaMelo already is good at certain things, and they don't matter at all.
Right.
And so the Raptors are here for me in this passive inspection. This has been the best of both worlds. They've tanked, so they have a good shot at getting an elite player, BJ Edgecombe, Dylan Harper, Cooper Flagg. And they've been, the players have, like, Barrett's been good. Quickly's been good. Barnes has been good. When Pirtle plays, they were pretty good. they had to bench these guys to lose the games they needed to, which is what you want. We are losing, we are not trying to win and failing. We are trying to lose and having to manipulate things because otherwise we're too good. That's a good outcome. Now, that doesn't mean that they're too good and like they're so good. It just means they're too good not to lose enough games. And so if you add the talent that they should get from this draft and you get the internal development and you get a little bit of roster adjustment, I'm still not sold on Darko, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, there's been a lot of confidence in Darko, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't see it.
I'm not sold on Masai.
Yeah, that's a whole other ball of wax.
They just traded for Brandon Ingram, like choosing something on Netflix after browsing for an hour and just being like, I guess this.
Yeah, and I'll also say, like, the circumstances of what I've heard about, like, there's just like a lot of interesting things about. I can't go into it, but like, there's a lot of interesting stuff about that situation. But I also just feel still kind of like, if you're looking at what did you want to accomplish this year? We want to get a top 5 pick, and we wanted to feel like we weren't completely in a wasteland. Mission accomplished.
Fair enough.
But you passed, not mission accomplished. You pass inspection. You could feel like, man, we really got something. When we get a draft pick, we're gonna be awesome. But instead, it's like, yeah, no, we can work with this. Jazz was like real borderline here. They're kind of the opposite of the Raptors, where it's just like they're so bad and so lost that it's like, yeah, they're in the best position to get Cooper Flag, and maybe they'll get him, maybe they won't, maybe they'll get Dylan Harper or Edgecombe or whoever. But like, needed to do that, need to get a guy, did that, repaired the relationship with Walker Kessler.
Yeah,
I still feel like you can feel pretty good about Will Hardy as a coach. And so to me, like, yeah. This wasn't this was not a fun Jazz season. Nobody had fun this year, but it's fine.
You had to do this because the Jazz the last couple of years have been around 30 wins. They've never had the full-blown, just bottom of the depths of the ocean floor tank. They do like, all right, we got to really just rip this Band-Aid off and just really do the tank the right way. And they did it. So congrats. So yeah, I have no problem with them being here. The Walker Kessler thing is the biggest thing to me, or not the biggest thing, but it's a big thing. Because after that, I don't really see anybody on this roster that's worth building around. Like, even Lauri Markkanen at his age, like, he might be more valuable to them as a trade chip at this point, right? Depending on what this next thing is. So that's fine. Next tier, though?
Yeah, next tier. This is the largest one. 7 teams came up just short. And this is pretty typical. Like, now everybody gets to win.
Yeah.
Knicks, Bucks, Hawks, Bulls, the Nets, the Nuggets, and the Trailblazers. Knicks defense isn't good enough, is not good enough. I do not care about the stretch without Jalen. The problem is when you have to guard with Jalen and Cat on the floor. Those are your two best players. You got to guard with them on the floor, and they can't. Maybe Mitchell Robinson fixes it and they go on some run. I'm not sold. So to me, yeah, good season, came up short because they're just not a championship level defense. So you cannot say that they are on the level of Cleveland and Boston, and therefore it's got to be considered you came up short.
The defense is really bad, and it's not good enough. And it's not good enough even when you got Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns putting the ball in the basket and playing half court. It's still bad in the half court. It doesn't work. I was having this conversation the other day about like who could be the next Taylor Jenkins, who's the next coach fired. That you're like, oh, didn't really see that one coming. Tibbs might be at the top of that list.
Yeah, maybe. That's more like veteran coach didn't get it. Like, did veteran coach got the same kind of performance that he usually gets.
Right.
The Bucks are baffling. I was looking at this today. Like, their 4-factor stuff is good. Their EFG is good. They shot 60% last night. Like, they should be so much better, and they're just not. Like, they're just not. So they came up just short in just like goodness, where it's like
this team could be all the way at the bottom. Honestly, I know it's hard because they're technically in the playoffs, but they might sink to 6th in the East. The Damian Lillard thing sucks. It's not their fault, but it happened. They traded away Chris Middleton, and so now it's basically just one other remaining piece, Brook Lopez, who might leave this offseason in terms of guys around Giannis who are part of that championship group. The Bucks just seem like they're done. Like, whatever it just seems over.
Yeah,
to me, and it's more. This is more of a vibes take, but it just all feels like a bummer.
Yeah, they came up short in the vibes department for sure, and I think a lot of it gets into the coaching. But you make decisions and you live with them. Hawks. I kind of feel like if Jalen Johnson doesn't get lost for the season, that we're maybe kind of like, hey, Atlanta. But they did. And they're still stuck in between where it's like Zachary Reese-Shai and Dyson Daniels, but also Trae Young. Like, it doesn't all come together where it's like they're not bad. They're really not. They're not that bad. They're not a bad team. They're just definitely not a good one either. So like they came up short in being able to get into a direction. They're still lost in that miasma, and that to me is really bad.
Still unclear at what the timeline is. You feel a little bit better after the DeJounte Murray for Dyson Daniels swap about some of the pieces. Riza-Shai's ended up being pretty decent as a rookie. He's not like what you would normally want out of a number 1 pick, but he's still good. Feels like he can fit a lot of different versions of whatever it is that the Hawks want to be. But yeah, there's still a little bit of for the 3rd straight year now, the parts don't exactly equal what we feel like the sum of the parts should be.
Yeah.
Like, there's just a lot of players on Atlanta like, oh, I like this guy, and I like that guy. Why is this team just not better?
Yeah. Let's skip Bulls. Nets is mostly they won too many games where it's like,
yep. This one really just depends on the lottery. This could just be mission accomplished if they just get the right ping pong ball.
If they get Cooper Flag, it's like, oh hey man, you found out Jordy Fernandez is a great coach. You found some really good talent out of the G League. I like Tyrese Martin. I like a lot of these guys. They got some player development in, and then they got Cooper Flag. But if they win too many games and they wind up like the 7th pick, like oh no, like this is it's just like man, what were you doing here? Nuggets, the defense is a joke. Period and dot. That's it. Like everything else with the Nuggets is great. Their defense is just they are schematically solved right now, and they have no way to repair it, and so they cannot solve that.
This could obviously get bumped up in the postseason if they get to the Western Conference Finals or something like, or certainly if they get to the NBA Finals, which I know you don't expect them to, but
could also drop though.
They could also drop, and that's a good point, right? They are very postseason reliant on this list, and I know that's literally what this list is not about, but they did develop some of their young guys. Westbrook has been mostly good. So there's some stuff to like, obviously, with Denver.
Blazers. You were the young, feisty. Hey, you know who's pretty good? The Blazers. Like you're that team, but you didn't win enough to be like actually competing for a play-in spot. You're not going to wind up getting a great draft pick, so you still don't have a number 1. You didn't trade Anthony Simons. You didn't trade Robert Williams. You didn't trade Jeremy Grant. You didn't waste this year. You just didn't make the most out of it in any sort of, you didn't come away being like, we did a lot of the stuff that we wanted to do other than like develop Tamani Camera, Shaden Sharp, a little bit of Scoot Henderson, Donovan Clean. I like those guys. I'm just kind of like, you're so far away from knowing what you're doing. You're still kind of like, you're still at the grocery store getting the ingredients together instead of actually sitting down to cook. Maybe you're even past that. Maybe you're not even at the grocery store. Maybe you've gotten all the ingredients out there on the counter, but like it's 5:30, man. Wife's gonna be home soon. Get to cooking. So that's
right. And some of the ingredients weren't right. And you're like, I'm supposed to return these, but I just don't really feel like it.
Yeah.
And I need to get some other things. I need to swap these things out. You're right about the Simons, Jeremy Grant stuff. Like it feels like this team should have made more moves, but at the same time, you know, the Denny Avdia thing was, I think it was the best. I wrote about it today. I think it was the best acquisition of the offseason last year, based on what you gave up and the return that you got.
That was great, by the way. I read that in the I read that. That was awesome.
Oh, thank you. So that's good. I'm still not buying the Scoot stuff. I know he made a little bit of a push a month ago. I don't love the fact that he just goes under the rim and dribbles for 15 seconds and then takes a shot, and we're like, oh, cool.
Counter. Cade sucked at finishing 2 for 2 years.
I want Scoot to work. I'm just not buying that a month ago. That was the leap. I'm still waiting for the leap. But that's enough Blazers talk. Next tier, final tier? No,
I got 2 more. Real quick. This one's we're just gonna gloss over. Failure to launch. Pelicans, Magic, Sixers, Spurs. Injuries. Yep. That's it. That's just injuries. Like, and you can talk about like Sixers, like, well, come on, like the Paul George thing and this, that, and the other. I get it, man, but like you didn't get a chance to evaluate this team with Paul George next to Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. You didn't get a chance to evaluate it. Jared McCain got hurt, for God's sakes. Like there was never an opportunity to really evaluate this team. And that doesn't mean that you don't need to like start over, because sometimes you have to. Pelicans are in that spot where it's like, yeah, sure, you didn't get a chance to evaluate it, but also how many times are you going to do this? Like you got to find a formula that you can evaluate. The Magic are a good team. Just you did not like it. They were a team that I've seen this happen where you have so many injuries and so many guys that can't play that much, have to play so much that it burns them out. And then there's ripple effects all the way down the offense. Now there's turning a corner. So like we could absolutely wind up with like I would not be shocked if the Magic passed inspection. Would not be surprised. But based on the injuries, I got him in failure to launch.
Yeah, Paolo's going to play less than 50 games. Franz less than 60. And when you say like just not a chance to evaluate like the Pelicans and the Sixers, obviously the Magic fall in the same camp. This to me, the whole year for Orlando, they were so fascinating to me because I love the fact that they didn't trade for a point guard. I loved it. I was like, yeah, let's see what Paolo and Franz are about. Let's see like ultimate bar rescue stress test, put them in the hot kitchen and see whether or not they can do it. And they didn't have a chance because they got hurt. And it was like, okay, did these guys grow as playmakers? They didn't have a chance to. And so now to say waste a season feels pretty harsh, but it kind of feels like it, you know? Yeah. And that really sucks for a really young team that a lot of people really liked.
You're still left with questions and not knowing if you're going to like, if you make a move, is it the wrong one because you didn't need to?
Exactly.
If you don't make a move, are you wasting time because the evidence was there and you didn't really get to evaluate it because of the sample? It's tough. And then we have utter disgrace.
Do it.
And only 6 teams had utter disgraces of seasons. The Phoenix Suns need no explanation. They've been talked about. I feel like they've been talked about to death. There's no hope. There's no future. There's no change. Everything's bad. I've heard that there is a good chance that they change coaches again this summer, with several people mentioning that they think Chauncey Billups might be a guy that might actually be hired there, which I don't know if I like that hire. I've got the Miami Heat. You lost Jimmy Butler. Your team fell apart for 3 weeks. Tyler Hero is your best player. Bam Adebayo had a frustrating season. Jaime Jaquez is fine. Nikola Jokic is fine. Like there's no way you can look at this season as anything more than a disaster for the Heat. The Hornets are so much worse than they were expected to be. I think Charles Lee has actually done some stuff in terms of installing culture, discipline, principles. It's very hard to see with how this team executes it, and to the buy-in. They got to make they thought they could do another run here with the Miles Bridge. Time to go. And if that doesn't work, and if you go back here next year and you're in the same spot, it's time to move on from LaMelo. Like it is figure this out next year time. This was the last year you get on this run.
I wish that we would have gotten more than 27 games of Brandon Miller, because he felt like he was the embodiment of what Charles Lee wanted to install. Yeah. Right. And we barely got to see him in this context, and it resulted in a lot of one-legged 3-pointers by LaMelo Ball.
Yeah. Grizzlies, pretty self-evident. Fired your coach. That's a move that you make when you're telling, like, even though it's like, well, we want to try and salvage the season. Well, then you should have waited, because if you fire the coach, you're telling the players, yeah, we know we don't have it. So what are you doing? Desmond Bane, I thought, took a big step backward this year in terms of his impact. Love Jalen Wells. He's been great. Ja. It's a really complicated thing with Ja. It's not simple the way it's portrayed, where it's like he's unhappy and he's a diva and he's it's not that simple. It's a very complicated story with him, and I think there's a lot left to write about his story with Memphis, even if that means that he gets traded this summer. I think there's like a lot more to figure out with what has gone and what has not gone on, according to people. But the fall off has been too dramatic. Now, like I keep thinking, like, they can't play this bad forever. They're too talented. Maybe they'll turn it around here last 6 games, get a little bump, still make the playoffs, avoid the play-in. And then who knows? Because I still like a lot of these guys. I think Jaren's been great. It hasn't been all bad, but anytime that, like, you fire a really good coach in Taylor Jenkins because your front office decided to sabotage them with drafting Zach Edey and then wanting to run a fast-paced, no-screens offense, it has not been a good year.
You could make the argument that they should be up and came up just short, just because it feels like maybe the plan all along was to fire their coach. So in that sense, maybe mission accomplished.
Maybe
they got to fire their coach. I don't know. They're very strange, and they kind of just occupy this weird nebulous place, because very few times have we ever seen a coach fired with 9 games left in the season. But I'm glad you brought up Jalen Wells and Jaren Jackson Jr. They're definitely the silver lining to that season.
The Mavericks, I don't know if you know this, but they traded Luka Doncic, and there's no scenario in which they, like, it's like, well, yeah, and they got hurt in the Grimes trade. I was like, I don't care, man. They traded Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis. Get out of here. Like, they traded Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis and Max Christie. Come on. So
Nico Harrison wants to make sure that you always mention Max Christie when you mention the trade. He loves and then your last team is the Kings. Can I make the argument that they have a sadder outlook than the Mavericks? Like, what the heck just happened to Sacramento? It was like yesterday that they had one of the best records in the West. Mike Brown was winning Coach of the Year. De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis were doing Sports Center hips, demonstrating their pick and roll 2-man game. And now De'Aaron Fox plays in San Antonio. Sabonis is going to evaluate his future this summer.
Yeah.
Mike Brown's not there anymore. And Sacramento, I feel so bad for those fans because that to me is one of the best fan bases in the league. And like you just looked up and you're like, oh my God, you Kang's all over the place again. What just happened?
I know.
At least the Mavericks have at least they have Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis, right? Like that's something.
I think there's a level to this that is you make the run, and that series was brutal with Golden State, 7-game series, really tough. You make the run, and then you're like, we don't need to make major changes. Look how good we were. We don't want to overreact. So you underreact. And I will say, there also I made this argument on a show I do called Daggers with about the Grizzlies too. Like the Grizzlies did everything possible to trade for Dorian Finney-Smith and then Cam Johnson this year. And the Nets were just stubborn and obstinate. Like they turned around and traded Dorian Finney-Smith to the Lakers without giving the Grizzlies a call back.
Right.
The Kings ran into the same problem. Last year, they went full court press to try and get OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam and couldn't get either. They tried so hard and couldn't get it done. So what do? You got these assets you want to move and you want to make a trade. So you are like, you talk yourself into DeMar DeRozan.
Right.
And this is how you wind up here. It's not DeMar's fault. It's just like DeMar is a wonderful human being that everyone respects, a great ball player, an elite mid-range shooter, and a guy that everybody in the league respects and appreciates, a total pro. His teams also get worse with him. They just do. They just get worse. And that starts the spiral of everything, I think, kind of happening. And then on top of it, stagnation, stuff like Davion Mitchell didn't pan out. They had a whole bunch of sequences. It just kind of all came apart. Look, Clutch was part of this too. Clutch had machinations Clutch has been trying to get one of their guards to play with Wemby since he was drafted. They've been working on that and they got their guy. They found the target there. And so then once Fox is gone and you add Zach LaVine and it's you're not good, Sabonis is going to reevaluate. Now you got to decide. Maybe they come out of this better. I'm not, it's kind of random because my thing is just the Kings might be worse in terms of win-loss record, but they didn't lose. They didn't rip the heart from their fans and then also not give them the ability to have closure.
Right.
The Mavs fans are never going to get up. They're never going to get over it.
You could, the Mavericks, you could argue that the Kings did it in a very clunky way, but did the thing that they were always going to have to do anyway, which was blow it up.
Right.
Because there is a ceiling when De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis is your top two players. And it was just never going to result in a championship type team in the Western Conference. Now, it doesn't help that now you're Chicago Bulls, Sacramento, but they, in a roundabout way, might have gotten to where they needed to go in the first place. But it's just tough.
The assumption is that the front office is going to get fired. And I don't know if that's fair or not because they did help build the roster that went to the playoffs. What I do know is the biggest thing that they need is Vivek loves radical aggressive ideas and he's gotten burned by that. I think he needs to really push for that again because if you're just hey, the fire sale, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Domantas Sabonis, best offers available. You have 48 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Clean house. Even offer up Keegan Murray because I love Keegan. And there's Keegan's the type of guy that teams will overpay for.
Yeah. Because
they're he's cost affordable, he's young, and he's awesome. Do those things and just not just draft picks, don't process it, but get super hyper aggressive and trying to then repackage those things and move in a different direction. You have to reshape this team in a very aggressive direction, which is extremely difficult in the league, but that's the only way to pull yourself out of the quicksand that they're in right now.
Matt Moore, you do a ton of great work at a ton of awesome places. The Hardwood Paroxysm Substack. You write for the Whiteboard over at Fanside on Mondays. You do a daily show over at the Locked On Podcast Network. You do Locked On Nuggets. What else might you have? Your Daggers YouTube channel. What else am I forgetting here?
Action Network. You love the betting. Check out the Action Network. Senior writer there. above me right here. Always glad to do the show with you, Wes. Love doing it.
Yeah, appreciate the time, man.